My grandfather left me $85,000, specifically for emergencies, school, or investment, not weddings. He wrote that part in by hand, in his own handwriting, in the margin of the trust document. My parents drained it down to $38,200 to pay for my sister's vineyard wedding. I didn't yell. I called the venue, introduced myself as the actual account holder, and asked them to explain in writing exactly who authorized that deposit. 6 weeks later, that venue called my mother back, in front of 30 guests at my sister's bridal shower, to ask if the money had been returned yet. My name is Mara Whitfield. I'm 29, and for most of my life I was the daughter my parents didn't have to think about. Devon is 3 years older than me. She's the one who needed things. A car in 11th grade because she couldn't concentrate taking the bus, the way I did every day for 2 years without complaining once. $9,200 in credit card debt my parents quietly paid off in the spring of 2022, the year Devon was between jobs for the second time in 18 months. A co-signed auto loan in the fall of 2023, when the first car finally died, and nobody asked her to consider a used one. A security deposit on an apartment she broke the lease on 4 months later. I never asked for any of that, and honestly, for most of my 20s, I didn't resent it either. I got a partial scholarship to a state school, waited tables at a diner 3 nights a week through all 4 years, and graduated with $11,400 in loans that I paid off myself on my own schedule. By the time I turned 26, my grandfather, Walter Kessler, watched all of it happen from the sidelines, and he never said much about Devon out loud. He was the kind of man who noticed everything and commented on almost none of it. But when he passed 3 years ago, at 81, his will did the talking he'd never done in person. He left me $85,000 in a trust, with a handwritten note clipped to the front page that I still have memorized word for word. For Mara. For emergencies, for school, or to invest. Not for anyone else's plans. She'll know what to do with it. There was a catch, and at the time it felt like a small, reasonable one, because I was 26 when he died, and he wanted me a little older before I had full, unsupervised control. The trust named my mother as interim trustee until I turned 30. She could manage the account, keep it invested through the estate's financial advisor, and release funds only for documented emergencies that fell within the language of the trust. She could not spend it on herself, on Devon, or on anything outside what my grandfather had specified in writing. I signed off on that structure without much of a second thought, because she was my mother, and because the money wasn't going anywhere. It was just sitting there, growing at a modest 4% a year, waiting for me to actually need it. 14 months ago, I took a fellowship in Singapore, running supply chain strategy for a logistics firm expanding across Southeast Asia, a role that paid almost double what I'd made in Chicago. It was the best professional year of my life, and I only came home 3 times, each trip too short to do more than see my apartment and repack a suitcase. I came home for good 3 weeks ago, with a job offer already signed, a plan to finally apply to business school in the fall, and 85,000 reasons to feel like the last decade had actually been worth it. I still remember the last real conversation I had with my grandfather, 6 weeks before he died, sitting across from him at his kitchen table while he drank decaf out of the same chipped blue mug he'd used my entire life. He asked me what I planned to do with myself, and I told him honestly that I didn't know yet, that I was still figuring it out one paycheck at a time. "Good," he said. "The ones who know too early usually stop paying attention. You'll figure it out because you're paying attention." Devon stopped paying attention a long time ago, and nobody in this family ever made her start again. I didn't think much of it at the time. I think about it constantly now. I logged into the trust account the same week I landed, mostly out of habit. Mostly because I wanted to see the number and feel something good about it after a 14-hour flight. The balance read $38,200. I stared at it for a full minute, assuming it was a display error, a delayed sync, anything except what it actually was. I pulled the full transaction history that same night, sitting on my kitchen floor with my laptop, still in my travel clothes. $47,000 had left that account in 6 separate disbursements over 5 months, starting the week after I'd left for my fellowship. $18,000 to something called Thistlewood Vineyard Events, marked simply venue deposit. $6,200 to a bridal boutique in Lincoln Park. The rest split across a florist, a catering deposit of $11,500, a photography retainer, and a line item labeled, without irony, wedding coordinator retainer. I didn't need a family group chat to tell me whose wedding that was. Devon got engaged to her boyfriend Aiden 14 months ago, right around the time I flew out. And the timeline lined up exactly. I called my mother that night, and I kept my voice level, because I already understood, even in that first minute, that the way I asked this question was going to matter later. "Mom, why is my trust account down $47,000? There was a pause I've thought about a lot since then, long enough that I almost asked if she was still on the line. "Mara, it's family money. Your grandfather would have wanted Devon to have a beautiful wedding. He wrote a note. It said emergencies, school, or investment. It said not for anyone else's plans. Those are his words, not mine, and I have the original document. You weren't using it. You were in Singapore. Devon needed it now, and you weren't even here to ask. Does Devon know where the money actually came from? She knows the wedding is being handled. That's all she needs to know right now." I didn't argue any further. I didn't cry, though I noticed, distantly, that my hands were shaking. I said okay, told her I needed to think, and hung up the phone before she could hear anything else in my voice. Then I opened a fresh document on my laptop and started making a list. The first call I made the next morning wasn't to my parents. It was to Denise Okafor, the estate attorney who'd drafted my grandfather's trust and who I hadn't spoken to since the reading of the will 3 years earlier. She pulled the trust document while I was still on the phone with her, and I could hear her flipping pages. "Your mother had discretion for documented emergencies within the scope your grandfather defined," she told me. "Wedding expenses for a third party don't qualify under any reasonable reading of this language, Mara. This is a fiduciary breach, a significant one, and a well-documented one from the look of these disbursements." I asked her exactly one question. "Can I get it back?" "Most of it, yes, especially the portions still held as deposits rather than spent outright. I'd move immediately, before more of it converts into non-refundable expenses." That was the moment the plan stopped being about being angry and started being about being fast and specific. I requested the full 6 months of transaction records that same afternoon, every wire, every check, every dollar amount and recipient, and had Denise send formal written notice to the bank flagging the account so no further disbursements could go out without either a court order or my direct written consent. I also opened a fireproof lockbox that week and started keeping physical printouts of every document alongside the digital backups, because Denise told me plainly that family disputes over money have a way of losing paperwork at exactly the wrong moment. Then I did something my mother did not see coming at all. I called Thistlewood Vineyard directly on a Tuesday morning, before my mother would have had any reason to be watching for it. I introduced myself calmly as Mara Whitfield, the actual titled account holder on the trust funds used for their $18,000 deposit, and I asked their events coordinator one simple, direct question. "Can you confirm in writing who authorized that payment, and from what account, and under what name?" There was a long silence on the other end, the kind that told me nobody had ever asked them that question before. "We'll need to review our records internally and get back to you within a few business days." They got back to me 2 days later with an email confirming the deposit had come from a trust account listed under my legal name, authorized by a signatory who was not the account's primary beneficiary of record. I forwarded that email straight to Denise within the hour. I didn't tell my parents any of this yet. I wanted the paper trail fully built and airtight before the conversation with them ever started. I also opened a new solo checking account that same week, separate from anything my parents had ever had access to, and moved my own personal savings into it, just in case things got messier before they got better. It felt almost paranoid at the time. Looking back, it was the single most useful thing I did in that entire first week. My mother called me on a Thursday, and I could hear it in her voice before she said a single word, the particular brightness she used whenever she wanted something from me. "Sunday dinner. The whole family. Devon's dying to catch up with you properly. It's been so long." I knew almost exactly what Sunday dinner was going to turn into. I went anyway, because I wanted to watch it happen in real time, with my own eyes, instead of secondhand over the phone. Devon hugged me at the door like nothing had happened, talking a mile a minute about tasting menus and a 5-tier cake and a photographer with a 9-month wait list she'd somehow gotten bumped up on. My father carved the chicken and made small talk about my flight home like this was any other ordinary Sunday in the family. It was my mother who brought it up, over dessert, in front of everyone, the way she always did whenever she wanted an audience quietly on her side, before the real conversation started. "Mara, I know you're a little upset about the money situation, but you have to understand, family helps family. You weren't even here. Devon needed a wedding, and you have a good job now, you'll make more." Devon's face changed slightly, the first real flicker of something like awareness crossing it. "Wait, Mom. What money situation?" "It's nothing, sweetie. Your sister's just being sensitive about some accounting details." I put my fork down and looked at my mother directly. "It's $47,000 out of the trust Grandpa Walter left me. For emergencies, school or investment, not weddings. He wrote that himself, in his own handwriting, and I have the note." The table went quiet in a way that felt almost physical, a pressure change in the room. My father cleared his throat and did what he always does in moments like this, which is nothing, and let my mother handle it alone. "You're really going to do this," my mother said, her voice dropping into something colder. "'Cause a scene over money you weren't even using." "I'm not causing a scene. I'm telling you I already spoke to the venue directly. I already spoke to Denise Okafor. I'm not asking you to give it back out of the kindness of your heart. I'm telling you it's already legally in the process of being returned." Devon stood up so fast, her chair scraped hard against the hardwood floor. "You're trying to ruin my wedding? Over money 6 weeks out? You've never even had to pay for anything real in your entire life. You have no idea what any of this actually costs." I looked at her for a second before I answered, keeping my voice flat and even. "I paid off $11,400 in student loans by myself, while you were getting a car co-signed for the second time in 2 years. I know exactly what things cost, Devon. I just don't spend other people's money that has their name on it to cover mine." Nobody said anything else for a long, heavy moment. I picked my coat up off the back of the chair, thanked my father for dinner out of pure habit, and left before dessert was even served. The wedding was 7 weeks out when Thistlewood Vineyard sent a formal letter by certified mail, CCing both me and my mother, stating that per Denise's written legal notice, the $18,000 deposit was now under active dispute pending resolution of the source funds, and that the venue's booking would be placed on hold, with a 14-day window before the date would be released to another couple entirely. My mother called me 11 times over the following 2 days. I let most of them go to voicemail, but I listened to every single one that evening, sitting at my kitchen table with a legal pad, taking notes on the pattern of what she said. The first few messages were angry, sharp, accusing me of trying to destroy the family over a technicality. Then they shifted into something closer to panic, because the caterer had heard about the dispute through the wedding coordinator and quietly informed Devon that the second deposit, $29,000 combined for catering and florals, was now also flagged for review pending the outcome. My father finally called me directly, which almost never happened in our family. Not once in the last 5 years that I could remember. "Mara, please. Whatever's going on between you and your mother, don't let it fall on Devon. She didn't do anything wrong here. She didn't ask where the money came from either, Dad. Nobody in this entire family asked me a single question before spending $47,000 that legally had my name on it. We'll pay you back, honey. We just need some time to sort it out. I'm not asking you to pay me back on some informal handshake basis. Denise already froze what's left in the account and started the formal recovery process on what's already gone. This isn't a negotiation anymore. It's already moving through the process." There was a long pause on the line, and then he said the thing that told me exactly where this family still stood, even now, even after everything. "You could stop it, though, if you wanted to. One phone call, and this all goes away quietly." I could have. I chose not to. I doubled the insurance on my own apartment that same week, too, an instinct Denise had planted in me almost as an aside. When money disputes get ugly, people sometimes get ugly in other ways, too. Better safe. Devon texted me directly for the first time in weeks, a single line, sent at 11 at night. "I hope you're happy." I didn't respond right away. When I did, 3 days later, it was short and deliberate. "I hope you ask better questions next time someone hands you a check with no explanation attached to it." My mother's next move was one I hadn't fully anticipated, which was to take the story to the rest of the family before I could. She called my Aunt Rosalind, her own younger sister, and framed the whole thing as me punishing Devon out of jealousy, conveniently leaving out the part where the money had my name legally attached to it. Rosalind called me the same night, not to lecture me, but to tell me flatly that she already knew the truth, because she'd been standing next to my grandfather in his study the week before he died, when he dictated that note about the trust out loud to make sure the lawyer got the wording exactly right. "He made me repeat it back to him twice," Rosalind told me. "Emergencies, school, or investment. Not for anyone else's plans. He wasn't confused about what he wanted, Mara. Your mother knows that too. She offered to put that in writing if it ever came up formally, and 3 weeks later it did, in a short signed statement Denise added to the fiduciary breach file, corroborating the exact intent behind my grandfather's handwritten note. My mother tried one more angle after that, a phone call from an old family friend of hers named Pam, who did conflict mediation on the side, offering to broker a private sit-down before this gets any messier for everyone, including you, Mara. I told Pam, politely, that I already had an attorney handling exactly that, and that any further conversation could go through Denise's office from that point forward. That call, more than anything else, was the moment my mother seemed to understand I wasn't going to fold under pressure applied sideways through people I trusted. The bridal shower happened anyway, 5 weeks before the wedding date, at my aunt's house in Naperville, because my mother refused to cancel anything and kept insisting, to anyone who'd listen, that the venue situation would resolve itself before the date actually mattered. I almost didn't go. Denise talked me into it, honestly, because Thistlewood's events director had reached out that same week, asking whether I'd be willing to confirm the return of funds in person before the 14-day window closed for good, and the shower was the only guaranteed time the whole family would be gathered in one place at once. I brought Denise's paperwork with me in a folder, tucked inside my bag, not planning to use it unless I had to. I didn't plan to make a scene going in. The scene found me anyway, about 40 minutes into the party, when the events director from Thistlewood called my mother directly, in front of a room full of my aunts and my mother's oldest friends, asking to confirm on the record whether the disputed funds had been formally resolved, because they needed a definitive answer before releasing the date to another couple already on their waiting list. My mother's face went white in real time, right there in the middle of the living room. She tried to take the call into the kitchen, phone pressed hard against her ear, voice already dropping into a whisper. I stood up, walked over and said, loud enough for the whole room to hear clearly, "Just put it on speaker, Mom. Everyone here should probably know what's actually happening with the money at this point." The room went dead silent. Forks stopped mid-air over cake plates. The events director, to her credit, laid it out plainly and professionally that the deposit had come from a trust account not legally hers to authorize, that the funds were formally under dispute per legal notice, and that without full resolution by the end of that week, the venue would officially be released back onto the market. Devon looked at me across the room, mascara already starting to run down one cheek. "You did this. On purpose. At my shower. In front of everyone. I called an attorney and asked for my grandfather's money back. Devon. The venue called during your shower on their own schedule, not mine. I didn't plan that part, but I'm not going to pretend I'm sorry it happened in front of people instead of quietly behind closed doors, the way this family always prefers to handle things until it's too late to fix them." My mother finally said the thing I think she'd been avoiding saying out loud since that very first phone call. "He left that money to you because he didn't trust me to run this family fairly. He said as much to my face before he died. I have spent 3 years trying to prove him wrong, and I did it the same way I always do, by taking care of Devon first, the way I always have. He left it to me because he trusted me," I said quietly. "Those are 2 completely different sentences, Mom. You just managed to prove both of them right in the exact same breath. My Aunt Rosalind, sitting near the window, spoke up for the first time all afternoon. Carol, I told you 3 weeks ago what he actually said. I stood in that room with him. You knew this wasn't a gray area before Mara ever made a single phone call. My mother didn't have an answer for that either. Devon wiped her face with the back of her hand and looked at me one more time. Quieter now, some of the anger drained out of her voice. Was any of it ever going to be enough for you? Watching me actually be happy for once? I was happy for you the day you got engaged, Devon, I said. I just wasn't going to fund it with money that had my name on a legal document and Grandpa's handwriting underneath it. Those aren't the same question, and I think somewhere you already know that. I didn't stay for the cake. The full $47,000 didn't come back all at once. Denise negotiated the venue and catering deposits down to a partial recovery, since a portion had already been spent on non-refundable planning fees before the dispute was filed. But within 3 weeks, $31,400 was back in the trust account, with the remaining balance still being pursued through a formal fiduciary breach claim against my mother, which Denise continues to handle on my behalf to this day. There was a formal deposition at Denise's office 2 months later, my mother across the table with her own attorney beside her, a court reporter typing quietly in the corner of the room. Denise walked through it methodically, disbursement by disbursement, date by date, asking my mother to confirm each signature and each authorization on the record. On March 14th, you authorized an $18,000 wire to Thistlewood Vineyard Events from a trust account held for the sole benefit of your daughter, Mara. Is that correct? Yes. And the trust document you signed as trustees specifies the funds may be released only for, and I'm quoting directly, emergencies, education, or investment. Is that also correct? Yes, but did you consider a family wedding to fall under any of those 3 categories at the time you authorized the wire? There was a long pause before my mother finally said the thing I think she'd been avoiding since that very first phone call. I thought I was helping. Helping whom? Denise asked, and let the silence sit there until my mother's attorney finally leaned over and suggested they take a short break. Devon's wedding didn't happen at Thistlewood. It happened 4 months later than originally planned, smaller, at a community hall my aunt helped book, paid for almost entirely out of Devon and Aiden's own savings, with a modest contribution from my parents that came from their own account this time, without touching a single dollar of mine. I wasn't invited. I found out the actual new date from a cousin's Instagram story, which felt honestly like a fair enough trade for everything that had come before it. My mother and I speak maybe 4 times a year now, short and strictly functional, mostly logistics around the ongoing legal claim and the occasional forwarded document. My father calls occasionally, always a little apologetic in his tone, never quite willing to say the actual thing he means out loud. I don't feel guilty about any of it, and I want to be honest about that instead of pretending otherwise. I expected the guilt to show up eventually. For a while I kept almost waiting for it. It never did. What I felt instead was something closer to relief, the specific quiet kind that comes from finally understanding exactly where you stand with people you used to assume you could trust without asking. It's been 8 months since that shower in Naperville. The trust, what's left of it plus what's been formally recovered, sits at $52,100 now, reinvested exactly the way my grandfather actually asked for it to be used. I start business school in the fall, tuition partially covered by that same account, the rest covered by the job I came home from Singapore specifically to take. I bought myself a plane ticket to tour the campus last month. No family group chat involved. No permission asked from anyone. I put a down payment on a 1-bedroom condo 2 months ago too, $22,000 from the recovered funds, exactly the kind of investment my grandfather wrote into that trust document in the first place. Devon and I haven't spoken since her actual wedding day, which I only know happened because of a photo a cousin posted. Aunt Rosalind still calls every couple of weeks, and she's the one who told me, gently, that my parents have started referring to the whole situation as the misunderstanding, which is its own kind of answer if I ever needed one. I think about my grandfather sometimes, and the note he left clipped to that trust document. The one that said I'd know exactly what to do with it when the time came. I did. Family is a word. Trust is a track record. For a long time, I let my family use those two words like they meant the exact same thing. They don't. Access is earned now, not assumed.